The crystalline displays aboard the Starweaver shimmered with streams of data as the survey vessel approached the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star. Chief Science Officer Dr. Ilara adjusted her breathing apparatus, a standard precaution when examining potentially hazardous worlds. Her iridescent scales shifted from their usual calm blue to a puzzled green as she studied the readings before her. Navigation Officer, please verify these atmospheric readings, she called out, her translator converting her harmonic tones into standard galactic common. I believe our sensors may need recalibration. The Navigation Officer, a towering figure whose crystalline form caught the light of nearby stars, moved gracefully to her station. Readings confirmed, Chief Science Officer. The atmosphere contains significant levels of carbon dioxide, methane, nitrogen oxides, and various particulate matter. By our standards, this mixture should be lethal to complex life forms. Dr. Ilara's scales rippled with interest. The planet below them was a swirling marble of blue and white, its surface partially obscured by clouds, and what their sensors identified as industrial emissions. Yet the biosignature readings were unmistakable. Not only was there life on this world, but it was teeming with it. Most fascinating, she murmured, manipulating the holographic display to zoom in on one of the larger urban centers. Bring up the historical atmospheric data. The display shifted, showing a timeline of the planet's atmospheric composition over the past century. The levels of pollutants had risen steadily, correlating with the growth of urban areas and industrial activities. According to all known xenobiological models, this should have led to a gradual decline in the planet's dominant species. Instead, the population had grown exponentially. Record this in the ship's log, Dr. Ilara instructed. We have encountered a Class 3 civilization on a planet with atmospheric conditions that should preclude complex life. The dominant species appears to be bipolar mammals, and they continue to function despite breathing air that contains compounds we classify as toxic. The bridge crew gathered around her station, their forms casting prismatic reflections across the smooth surfaces of the ship's interior. The medical officer, whose luminescent tendrils pulsed with concern, spoke up. Perhaps they are in a state of decline that isn't immediately apparent. Many species experience a population boom before sudden collapse. Dr. Ilara brought up more detailed scans of the urban centers. The images showed humans going about their daily lives, walking, running, working in outdoor conditions that the ship's computer classified as hazardous. Children played in parks under skies that would send any Galactic Council species running for their environmental shelters. No, she said slowly, her scales shifting to the deep purple of scientific excitement. Look at their medical facilities, their emergency response systems, their environmental adaptation technologies. These aren't the actions of a dying species. They're thriving. They've somehow adapted to conditions that would kill most known sentient beings. She made her decision quickly, her tendrils rippling with purpose. Send an immediate request to the Galactic Science Academy. We need a full xenobiological assessment team. This warrants comprehensive study. As the communication officer transmitted the request, Dr. Ilara continued to watch the scenes unfolding below. A group of humans was conducting what appeared to be an outdoor fitness class in an area with air quality readings that made her environmental suit's filters work overtime just processing the data. Add a personal note to the request, she added. Initial observations suggest we may need to reevaluate our basic assumptions about species adaptability and environmental tolerance. These humans aren't merely surviving in what we consider poison. They're building civilizations in it. The Starweaver maintained its position in high orbit, its advanced cloaking systems keeping it hidden from Earth's detection capabilities. As the crew awaited a response from the Academy, they continued to gather data, each new observation adding to their growing realization that they had stumbled upon something unprecedented in galactic scientific history. None of them yet realized that their discovery would eventually force the entire Galactic Council to reconsider what made a species truly advanced, or truly dangerous. The ancient Buddhist monastery clung to the mountainside like a jewel set in stone, its weathered walls blending seamlessly with the craggy Himalayan peaks. To human eyes, the eastern wing appeared empty and partially ruined. In reality, it housed the most sophisticated xenobiological research station ever deployed to Earth. Zix-427 adjusted the camouflage field generators as morning sun painted the mountains gold. The technology didn't just hide their presence. It bent light and sound around their equipment in ways that made humans instinctively avoid the area. Even the curious young monks who often explored the monastery's forgotten corners would suddenly remember urgent duties elsewhere when they approached the eastern wing. Environmental analysis complete, announced the research station's artificial intelligence, its voice a gentle harmonic that wouldn't carry beyond their secured space. Local air quality has declined 12% since yesterday due to wind patterns carrying industrial particulates from the nearest metropolitan area. The senior researchers' crystalline appendages shifted, refracting the morning light into subtle patterns of concern. According to their original mission parameters, this should have been a simple documentation of a species in decline. Instead, their observation posts around the globe kept reporting the same puzzling data. Humans were not just surviving, but actively expanding into areas their sensors classified as increasingly hazardous. Display the morning activity report, Zix-427 commanded, settling into the observation station. The holographic display sprang to life, showing feeds from their various monitoring devices throughout the region. In the valley below, farmers were already tending their fields, working in air that contained levels of pollutants that would have triggered emergency protocols in any Galactic Council civilization. A construction crew was breaking ground for a new building, their machinery adding more particulates to the already burdened atmosphere. Most remarkably, a group of human athletes was running along a mountain trail, their bodies adapting to both the thin air and the environmental toxins with seemingly impossible ease. Senior researcher called out Vent 312, the team's medical specialist, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing with excitement. You need to see these cellular samples we collected from the local medical facility's waste disposal. The display shifted to show a microscopic view of human tissue samples. The cells were unlike anything in their vast biological databases, where other species' cells showed strain and degradation when exposed to environmental toxins. Human cells displayed remarkable recovery patterns. Look at this defense mechanism, Ven 312 continued, highlighting a particular cellular structure. It's not just adapting to the pollutants, it's becoming more efficient at processing them. It's as if their entire cellular structure treats environmental stress as a growth opportunity rather than a threat. Zix-427 recorded their observations, aware that each new discovery further contradicted the Galactic Council's established theories about species development. Their own civilization had achieved space travel by maintaining pristine environmental conditions that supported their sensitive biological needs. Humans, it seemed, had taken the opposite approach. While alert chimed softly, drawing their attention to one of the external monitors. A young human female had set up an easel near the monastery's main entrance, preparing to paint the sunrise. The researchers watched in fascination as she worked for hours in conditions their environmental suits classified as suboptimal, creating art that captured the very atmospheric distortion that should have been slowly poisoning her. Send a priority update to the Science Academy, Zix-427 decided, their crystalline form shifting to indicate deep thought. Include all cellular analysis and environmental data from the past week. Add a personal notation. We may need to consider the possibility that what we classify as environmental hazards may have actually served as evolutionary catalysts for this species. As the morning progressed, more humans began their daily activities around the monastery. The research team continued their observations, each new data point adding to their growing realization that they had fundamentally misunderstood the relationship between species development and environmental adaptation. In their hidden laboratory, sophisticated equipment hummed softly, analyzing samples and recording data that would eventually force the Galactic Council to confront an uncomfortable truth. They had based their entire understanding of species advancement on assumptions that humans were quietly proving wrong with every breath they took. Dawn had barely touched the mountain peaks when the research team's sensors detected the approaching human. Right on schedule, just as she had been for the past 42 days, the mountain runner appeared on the winding trail below their hidden observation post. Her breath created small clouds in the crisp morning air as she maintained a steady pace up the punishing incline. Subject designation HR 217 has begun her daily ascent, Ven 312 noted, activating the full sensor array. Current elevation, 2,800 meters. Local air quality index, hazardous by council standards. Oxygen content, 73% of sea level values. Zix 427 moved closer to the observation window, their crystalline form shifting to enhance their visual reception. The runner's vital signs appeared in a holographic overlay. Heart rate elevated but stable, oxygen saturation levels that should have been impossible at this altitude, cellular adaptation patterns that defied their xenobiological models. Compare current bioratings with her initial baseline from 6 weeks ago, Zix 427 instructed. The data streams shimmed into view, telling a story that continued to puzzle the research team. Not only had the runner's performance not deteriorated in the harsh conditions, she had actively improved. Remarkable, whispered Lox 891, the team's atmospheric specialist. Her lung efficiency has increased by 23%. Her blood shows elevated red blood cell counts, enhanced oxygen carrying capacity, and improved toxin processing. She's not just surviving these conditions, she's optimizing for them. The runner paused at a switchback, taking a drink from her water bottle. The researchers' instruments detected trace amounts of pollutants in the water that would have required immediate medical intervention for their own species. The human simply took another drink and continued her ascent. Update the environmental readings, Zix 427 ordered, their scientific excitement causing ripples of color through their crystalline structure. I want full atmospheric analysis, particulate counts, and radiation levels. The data appeared instantly, painting a picture that should have described an environment hostile to complex life. The morning air carried industrial pollutants from distant cities, mixed with natural volcanic gases from the mountain range. Ultraviolet radiation levels were elevated due to the altitude. The thin air itself would have required emergency protocols for most galactic species. Yet the runner pressed on, her breathing steady, her pace unwavering. More incredibly, their sensors detected her body actively adapting to each challenge the environment presented. Her cellular structure was literally rewriting itself to better process the available oxygen, neutralize toxins, and protect against radiation damage. I believe we're observing something unprecedented, Ven 312 said, their medical sensors focused intently on the human's biological responses. This isn't simple survival or even basic adaptation. Her body is treating these harsh conditions as a stimulus for improvement. Each cellular stress response is becoming more efficient, more refined. The runner reached a particularly steep section of the trail. Instead of slowing down, she increased her pace, her vital signs showing a controlled response to the increased demand. The research team watched in fascination as her body temperature regulated itself precisely. Her muscles worked with increasing efficiency, and her cellular repair mechanisms activated in real time. Add this to the priority data packet for the Science Academy, Zix 427 decided. Include a complete comparison of her biological markers from day one to present. They need to understand, these humans don't just endure what we consider hostile conditions. They actively seek them out as a path to enhancement. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the mountainside, the runner finally reached her usual turning point. She paused, stretched, and took in the view of the valley below. The researchers' sensors continued to record every aspect of her physiology, documenting changes that would force them to reconsider everything they thought they knew about biological adaptation. Perhaps, Lox 891 mused, watching the runner begin her descent, we have been asking the wrong question. Instead of wondering how humans survive in these conditions, we should be asking ourselves what they might become because of them. The research station's laboratory hummed with activity as Ven 312 manipulated the holographic controls of their molecular scanner. Suspended in the device's examination field, a collection of human tissue samples glowed with subtle bioluminescence. Each sample told a different story of adaptation and survival that challenged everything the research team thought they knew about biological resilience. Display comparative analysis. Focus on cellular repair mechanisms, Ven 312 instructed. The holographic display expanded, showing intricate molecular structures that danced and shifted as the analysis progressed. Cross-reference with our complete xenobiological database. Zix 427 moved closer, their crystalline form refracting the soft light of the laboratory. Show me the comparison with other carbon-based species from similar environmental categories. The results materialized in the air before them, a cascade of data that painted an increasingly extraordinary picture. Where other species showed cellular degradation when exposed to environmental toxins, human cells displayed remarkable repair capabilities. More incredibly, each subsequent exposure appeared to enhance these repair mechanisms rather than overwhelm them. Look at this pattern, Ven 312 said, highlighting a particular sequence. Their DNA repair systems don't just fix damage. They adapt to prevent similar damage in the future. It's like their entire cellular structure learns from each challenge it faces. A soft chime interrupted their observation as the latest batch of medical records was decoded. The team had been discreetly collecting discarded medical waste and data from hospitals across different environmental zones, building a comprehensive picture of human biological responses to various conditions. Compare respiratory tissue samples from high-altitude populations with coastal urban dwellers, Zix 427 requested. The display shifted, showing lung tissue adaptations that defied conventional xenobiological models. These modifications should take hundreds of generations to develop, yet we're seeing them occur within a single lifetime. The laboratory's artificial intelligence processed the new data, its crystalline core pulsing with increased activity. Analysis complete. Human cellular adaptation rate exceeds all known species in the Galactic database by a factor of 17. Genetic Flexibility Index indicates potential for rapid environmental adaptation, previously considered theoretically impossible. Lox 891 entered the laboratory, their form shifting with excitement. You need to see this atmospheric analysis. I've been studying historical data from their industrial development period. They interfaced with the main display, bringing up a timeline of Earth's changing atmosphere. Look at the correlation between increasing pollution levels and accelerating human adaptation responses. The display showed a clear pattern. As industrial activity had increased atmospheric toxins, human cellular repair mechanisms had become progressively more sophisticated. Rather than succumbing to the deteriorating air quality, the species had developed increasingly efficient ways to process and survive in their changing environment. It's not just survival, Ven 312 observed, their medical sensors pulsing with intensity. Their bodies treat these environmental challenges like a training program. Each exposure strengthens their adaptive capabilities. They've turned what should be lethal into a catalyst for advancement. Zix 427 moved to their primary research terminal, beginning to compose an urgent update to the Science Academy. We need to revise our understanding of species development. Our assumption that technological advancement requires environmental purity may have been fundamentally flawed. The laboratory's sensors continued to process new data as tissue samples revealed more secrets. Each analysis showed the same pattern. Human cellular structure possessed an adaptability that went beyond simple survival. Their bodies weren't just enduring harsh conditions, they were using them as evolutionary stepping stones. Add this notation to the report. ZX-427 instructed, their crystalline form pulsing with the intensity of scientific discovery. Human biological resilience appears to be a direct result of environmental stress, not in spite of it. Their perceived weakness may have been their greatest advantage. While we sought to create perfect environments for advancement, they let their hostile environment perfect them. As the team continued their analysis, none of them yet realized that their discoveries would soon challenge the very foundations of galactic civilization's approach to species development and environmental adaptation. The environmental chamber in the research station's laboratory glowed with an eerie blue light as it replicated Earth's various atmospheric conditions. Through its transparent walls, ZX-427 watched as the latest experiment unfolded, their crystalline form shifting between shades of anticipation and disbelief. Begin simulation series theta, they instructed. Replicate atmospheric conditions from the most polluted human metropolitan areas. Maximum particulate concentration. The chamber filled with a grayish haze as the artificial environment matched the air quality of Earth's most industrialized regions. Inside, carefully cultivated human tissue samples floated in nutrient suspension, their cellular structures clearly visible through the station's advanced monitoring equipment. Baseline readings established, reported Ven 312, their medical sensors pulsing steadily. Beginning exposure sequence now. Time mark initiated. The research team watched intently as the tissue samples encountered the toxic environment. According to every xenobiological model they possessed, the samples should have shown immediate signs of stress and degradation. Instead, something remarkable happened. "Look at these adaptation patterns," Lox 891 exclaimed, their form brightening with excitement as they studied the real-time data. The cellular structures aren't just defending against the toxins, they're developing new mechanisms to process them. The holographic displays surrounding the chamber showed cascading streams of data as the tissue samples responded to the challenging environment. Within hours, new cellular structures had formed, creating more efficient ways to filter toxins and repair damage. Compare these results with the historical database, ZX-427 ordered. The artificial intelligence compiled the data, presenting a stark contrast between human tissue responses and those of every other known species in similar conditions. Analysis complete, the AI announced. Human tissue samples show a 47% higher adaptation rate than the previous galactic record. New cellular defense mechanisms are emerging at an unprecedented rate. Ven 312 adjusted their sensors, focusing on a particularly interesting reaction. The samples aren't just adapting to current conditions, they're developing preventive measures against potential future stressors. It's as if their cellular structure is learning and evolving in real time. The team initiated the next phase of their experiment, introducing new environmental challenges to the chamber. They simulated conditions from different parts of Earth: the thin air of high mountains, the chemical-laden atmosphere of industrial zones, the mixed pollutants of urban centers. Recording something extraordinary, Lox 891 reported, their atmospheric sensors pulsing rapidly. Each new environmental stress isn't weakening the samples, it's making them more resilient. The adaptation patterns are becoming more sophisticated with each challenge. The holographic displays filled with new data as the tissue samples continued to demonstrate unexpected responses. Complex molecular structures formed and reformed, creating increasingly efficient ways to process toxins and repair damage. This goes beyond simple adaptation, ZX-427 observed, their scientific excitement causing ripples of color through their crystalline form. These cellular responses suggest an inherent capability for environmental mastery we've never seen before. Ven 312 moved to their primary research terminal, beginning to compile their findings. Consider the implications. If human tissue can adapt this rapidly in controlled conditions, imagine the potential for whole organism adaptation in real-world environments. The chamber's monitoring systems continued to record data as the samples developed even more sophisticated responses to the challenging conditions. Each new adaptation seemed to build on the previous ones, creating an increasingly robust defense against environmental stressors. Prepare a priority transmission to the Science Academy, Zix 427 decided, their form pulsing with the intensity of discovery. Include all experimental data and a preliminary analysis. They need to understand, we're not just observing environmental adaptation. We're witnessing the development of a biological system that turns environmental challenges into evolutionary advantages. As the research team documented their findings, the implications of their discovery began to take shape. They had come to study what they thought was a primitive species struggling in a poisoned environment. Instead, they were discovering a form of life that had turned hostile conditions into a catalyst for advancement. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Science Academy shimmered with the combined light of hundreds of crystalline beings, each one a leading expert in their field. The emergency session had been called with unprecedented urgency, drawing researchers from across the galaxy to witness the presentation of findings from Earth. The central holographic display dominated the chamber, showing detailed molecular structures that challenged centuries of established xenobiological theory. Senior researcher Zix 427's report played through the quantum communication network, their observations causing waves of color changes through the assembled scientists. The data cannot be disputed, announced chief theorist Mix 890, their form shifting through shades of scientific confusion. These humans have achieved in centuries what our models predicted would take millions of years. Their cellular adaptation rate exceeds our theoretical maximum by orders of magnitude. The display shifted to show time-lapse footage of human tissue samples responding to various environmental challenges. The assembled scientists watched in fascination as the cells demonstrated adaptation patterns that defied conventional understanding. "Look at these repair mechanisms," a young researcher called out, their crystalline form bright with excitement. They're not just surviving toxic conditions, they're using them as catalysts for enhancement. Every environmental stress produces a more refined adaptation response. The Academy's artificial intelligence processed the incoming data streams, updating the Galactic Species Classification database in real time. Previous models of evolutionary development began showing error messages as they failed to account for the new information. "We must consider a radical possibility," suggested X 721, the Academy's expert on emerging civilizations. Their form pulsed with the intensity of theoretical breakthrough. What if our fundamental assumption about environmental purity being necessary for advanced development was wrong? What if controlled exposure to environmental challenges accelerates species evolution? The holographic display updated to show Earth's atmospheric changes over the past 3 centuries. The correlation between increasing industrialization and accelerating human adaptation capabilities was unmistakable. Their industrial age, Mex 890 observed, which we dismissed as primitive and self-destructive, may have inadvertently created the perfect conditions for rapid species advancement. They turned what we considered pollution into an evolutionary catalyst. The assembled scientists watched as new data continued to stream in from the Earth observation team. Each report showed further evidence of human resilience and adaptation that went beyond anything their models had predicted possible. Their space program becomes even more remarkable in this context, noted a senior atmospheric specialist. They're not just reaching for the stars despite their challenging environment. They're reaching for them because of it. Their technological development has been shaped by the very conditions we thought would prevent it. The Academy's main computer system struggled to integrate the new data into existing theoretical frameworks. Traditional models of species development, based on the assumption that technological advancement required environmental stability, began showing systemic failures. "We need to revise our entire approach to species classification," X 721 declared, their form pulsing with the urgency of discovery. "The humans have demonstrated that our basic assumptions about environmental adaptation and technological advancement were fundamentally flawed." In the observation gallery above, junior researchers watched in amazement as centuries of established theory underwent rapid revision. The implications extended far beyond simple scientific curiosity. This discovery would affect everything from first contact protocols to galactic development guidelines. Begin compiling a new theoretical framework. Chief Theorist Mix 890 instructed the Academy's eye. Incorporate all data from the Earth observation team. We need to understand not just how humans adapted to their environment, but how that adaptation might predict their future development. As the emergency session continued, the assembled scientists grappled with increasingly profound questions. If humans had achieved this level of adaptation in their relatively short history, what might they become in the centuries to come? More importantly, how would this discovery change the galaxy's understanding of species development and environmental interaction? The answers would reshape galactic civilization's approach to everything from planetary development to species classification, and at the center of it all was a species that had turned their greatest environmental challenges into their most remarkable advantages. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Science Academy shimmered with the combined light of hundreds of crystalline beings, each one a leading expert in their field. The emergency session had been called with unprecedented urgency, drawing researchers from across the galaxy to witness the presentation of findings from Earth. The central holographic display dominated the chamber, showing detailed molecular structures that challenged centuries of established xenobiological theory. Senior researcher Zix 427's report played through the quantum communication network, their observations causing waves of color changes through the assembled scientists. The data cannot be disputed, announced Chief Theorist Mix 890, their form shifting through shades of scientific confusion. These humans have achieved in centuries what our models predicted would take millions of years. Their cellular adaptation rate exceeds our theoretical maximum by orders of magnitude. The display shifted to show time-lapse footage of human tissue samples responding to various environmental challenges. The assembled scientists watched in fascination as the cells demonstrated adaptation patterns that defied conventional understanding. "Look at these repair mechanisms," a young researcher called out, their crystalline form bright with excitement. They're not just surviving toxic conditions, they're using them as catalysts for enhancement. Every environmental stress produces a more refined adaptation response. The Academy's artificial intelligence processed the incoming data streams, updating the Galactic Species Classification database in real time. Previous models of evolutionary development began showing error messages as they failed to account for the new information. "We must consider a radical possibility," suggested X721, the Academy's expert on emerging civilizations. Their form pulsed with the intensity of theoretical breakthrough. What if our fundamental assumption about environmental purity being necessary for advanced development was wrong? What if controlled exposure to environmental challenges accelerates species evolution? The holographic display updated to show Earth's atmospheric changes over the past 3 centuries. The correlation between increasing industrialization and accelerating human adaptation capabilities was unmistakable. Their industrial age, Mex 890 observed, which we dismissed as primitive and self-destructive, may have inadvertently created the perfect conditions for rapid species advancement. They've turned what we considered pollution into an evolutionary catalyst. The assembled scientists watched as new data continued to stream in from the Earth observation team. Each report showed further evidence of human resilience and adaptation that went beyond anything their models had predicted possible. Their space program becomes even more remarkable in this context, noted a senior atmospheric specialist. They're not just reaching for the stars despite their challenging environment. They're reaching for them because of it. Their technological development has been shaped by the very conditions we thought would prevent it. The Academy's main computer system struggled to integrate the new data into existing theoretical frameworks. Traditional models of species development, based on the assumption that technological advancement required environmental stability, began showing systemic failures. We need to revise our entire approach to species classification, X721 declared, their form pulsing with the urgency of discovery. The humans have demonstrated that our basic assumptions about environmental adaptation and technological advancement were fundamentally flawed. In the observation gallery above, junior researchers watched in amazement as centuries of established theory underwent rapid revision. The implications extended far beyond simple scientific curiosity. This discovery would affect everything from first contact protocols to galactic development guidelines. Begin compiling a new theoretical framework, Chief Theorist MEX 890 instructed the Academy's eye. Incorporate all data from the Earth observation team. We need to understand not just how humans adapted to their environment, but how that adaptation might predict their future development. As the emergency session continued, the assembled scientists grappled with increasingly profound questions. If humans had achieved this level of adaptation in their relatively short history, what might they become in the centuries to come? More importantly, how would this discovery change the galaxy's understanding of species development and environmental interaction? The answers would reshape galactic civilization's approach to everything from planetary development to species classification, and at the center of it all was a species that had turned their greatest environmental challenges into their most remarkable advantages. The launch countdown echoed through the research station's monitoring systems as ZIX 427 and their team watched the massive rocket on their holographic display. Steam billowed around the launch pad as the human spacecraft underwent its final preparations, its pristine white surface gleaming in the morning sun. Their fuel mixture would be considered hazardous waste by Council standards. LOX 891 noted their atmospheric sensors analyzing the rocket's emissions. Yet they've engineered systems to harness its explosive potential with remarkable precision. The research team had chosen this moment to compile their final report to the Galactic Science Academy. After months of observation, the launch would serve as the perfect culmination of their findings about human adaptability and innovation. Begin recording final observations, ZIX 427 instructed, their crystalline form shifting through shades of scientific anticipation. Include complete atmospheric analysis and human biological responses during launch sequence. The countdown continued as their sensors monitored every aspect of the event. The Launch Control Center buzzed with activity, each human's vital signs showing the now familiar pattern of stress responses being channeled into enhanced performance. Remarkable neural activity patterns in the launch team, reported VEN 312, their medical sensors pulsing steadily. They're not just managing the immediate challenges, they're anticipating and preparing for potential problems we haven't even considered. The rocket's engines ignited, creating an inferno that their instruments registered as an environmental catastrophe. Yet within this artificial hellscape, human ingenuity had crafted a path to the stars. The spacecraft rose on a column of fire, its trajectory perfectly calculated to pierce through Earth's polluted atmosphere. Recording cellular adaptation data from the astronauts, VEN 312 announced. Their bodies are already adjusting to the changing conditions. The acceleration stress, radiation exposure, and atmospheric transition. They're treating it all as just another adaptation challenge. The research station's artificial intelligence compiled the data streams, creating a comprehensive picture of humanity's approach to space exploration. It wasn't just about the technology. It was about their unique biological and psychological ability to adapt to extreme conditions. Update the species classification database, ZIX 427 instructed as they watched the rocket climbing higher. Humanity requires a new category. They're not just surviving in adverse conditions, they're using those conditions as a springboard for advancement. The spacecraft reached the upper atmosphere, where Earth's protective layers grew thin. The research team's sensors detected increasing radiation levels that would have caused panic in most spacefaring races. The human crew's biological responses showed only controlled adaptation and focused determination. Their entire approach to space exploration reflects their evolutionary history. LOX 891 observed, where we sought to create perfect environments, they learned to thrive in imperfect ones. Every challenge we avoided, they embraced and overcame. The rocket continued its ascent, breaking free from Earth's atmosphere. The research team's final data streams showed something extraordinary. The human crew's adaptation responses were becoming more efficient with each passing moment in space. They weren't just surviving the journey. They were being strengthened by it. Complete the final report, Zix 427 decided, their form pulsing with the weight of discovery. Include this conclusion. We came to study what we thought was a primitive species struggling in a poisoned world. Instead, we found beings who have turned environmental challenges into evolutionary advantages. Their polluted atmosphere didn't weaken them. It prepared them for the harsh realities of space exploration. As the spacecraft achieved orbit, Ven 312 added their own observation to the report. Their greatest achievement isn't surviving in hostile conditions. It's learning to use those conditions as tools for advancement. Every obstacle we thought would limit them has instead become a stepping stone to the stars. The research station began its shutdown sequence as the team prepared to depart Earth. Their mission had revealed something far more significant than mere scientific data. They had discovered a species that didn't just dream of reaching the stars. They had used every hardship, every challenge, and every environmental obstacle as preparation for their journey into the cosmic frontier. In their final transmission to the Science Academy, Zix 427 included a personal note. In learning to breathe poison, they learned to breathe stardust. Their path to the stars wasn't despite their challenges, it was because of them.